Hi everyone, happy Friday. So coming at you with Faith Friday for today. So this is 2 Corinthians 12. And this is actually a very interesting portion of 2 Corinthians where Paul is talking about a thorn in his flesh. And I'm sure if you guys have been in the church or even just heard probably a sermon has touched on this at some point. And the reason being is because it's a very, in my opinion, impactful verse and really important message, I think, for every single Christian to think about. And so I wanted to read it and then talk a little bit about like a personal thing. So this is a little bit different in terms of like Faith Friday because I wanted to read it and then share with how it's applied to my life very specifically. So here it goes. So this is 2 Corinthians 12, and Paul is talking, and this is starting in verse 6. If I wanted to boast, apologize, Stanley in the background. If I wanted to boast, I would be no fool in doing so because I would be telling the truth. But I won't do it because I don't want to give any credit. I don't want anyone to give me credit beyond what they can see in my life or hear in my message. Even though I've received such wonderful revelations from God. So to keep me from becoming proud, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger from Satan to torment me and keep me from becoming proud. 3 times I begged the Lord to take it away. Each time he said, "My grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness." So now I am glad to boast about my weaknesses so that the power of Christ can work through me. That's why I take pleasure in my weaknesses and in the insults, hardships, persecutions, and troubles that I suffer for Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Love it. So Paul never specifically talks about what the thorn in his flesh is. So whether this be a physical weakness, whether this be a spiritual weakness, something that he struggles with on a daily basis, we don't know. But he talks about God's power being made perfect in his weakness. And this is, for a couple reasons, one of my favorite verses in 2 Corinthians and also in the Bible, just when he talks about this. First of all, it gives us perspective on Paul. Paul was formerly Saul. He persecuted Christians. He killed Christians. And he had one of the most dramatic transformations in the Bible. And he became one of the greatest messengers for Christ that ever existed. So first of all, that gives, I think, a lot of encouragement and hope when we don't feel like we are good enough to be used by God. Paul is very open about his transformation and about how he persecuted Christians. And think about it. He killed Christians and then became one of the greatest writers in the Bible, right? So if Paul can do that, I think we can make a difference. So first of all, that. Second of all, he's very, quote, humanized in this, talking about a thorn in his flesh. When he was transformed from Saul to Paul, he didn't, at the blink of an eye, all of a sudden become perfect and have no struggles. He talks about this thorn in his flesh. He also, I can't remember exactly where this is, talks about, I do the things I don't want to do. I don't do the things I want to do. And kind of this struggle, this daily struggle that we all have with doing things, we mess up, we sin, we fall short. And being so frustrated. And he is really giving us that perspective, being so vulnerable. Paul was so incredibly vulnerable in so many of the books that he wrote and just the passages and his failures and his struggles. But yet, what a blessing he has been to so many people. So that's, first of all, what really stood out to me. Second of all, talking about specifically a thorn in his flesh. And so when you think about that, I immediately think about my weaknesses. And I think about things that I struggle with that I wish I did not struggle with. And specifically that came to my mind was thinking about my struggles with, I had really a huge struggle in high school and into college with nutrition, with my eating, with my exercising, my body image. In college, I had some depression. I mean, I really struggled with my identity, with my body image, with my food. And I think about that is my ministry now. And those struggles, I still struggle with nutrition at times. I still struggle with body image. And I'll be the first to say it. I still do. Even though it may be better, I feel like that's a thorn in my flesh. That we all struggle with something, right? I struggle with other things too, but I won't get into that. But since you all know me, or many of you guys who follow me here know me through the fitness industry and potentially maybe some of the success that I've had, none of that would be possible without Jesus and his power made perfect through my weakness. When I am weak, he is strong. God gives us these opportunities to rely on him. If we could just rely on our own might, what glory does that give God? It only gives us the glory, right? If we go through life relying on our own strength, that we're only relying on we're basically glorifying ourselves, right? But through our weakness, God allows us to have these struggles and these weaknesses in order to fulfill a greater purpose. I 100% see that in my life. Woo, I'm feeling passionate. I 100% feel that in my life with my own struggles with nutrition, with training, with so many of the things that my clients struggle with. And this is my line of work, and this is my ministry. And so I'm able to have compassion. If I wouldn't have struggled with these things, would I have the same compassion that I have now for people who maybe are going through something similar? Absolutely not. But through this weakness, God has been strong and provided and blessed me in this, even though I still struggle. But you know what? If I didn't have a struggle, would I be able to understand or have compassion or be able to be there for someone who's struggling with something similar? No. I might get a little bit callous to it and say, just suck it up. You know, sometimes if we're not struggling with something, sometimes we look at other people's problems and say, well, what's the big deal? Just work harder. What's the big deal? Just stop drinking. What's the big deal? Just stop doing drugs. But if you've dealt with those things yourself, you understand. And so he says, each time he said, the Lord, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. When we have weaknesses and we can rely on God, that is when he comes through and he shines. God, I think about Gideon. Okay, this is another passage that I could bring up. And talking about, okay, well, basically, there's a war, and he is down to the bare minimum amount of soldiers. And he still wins. Why? God wanted him to be at the end of his rope, so that if he had victory, he couldn't claim the victory himself. It was the victory through the Lord. So, thinking about this, that is why Paul says, that is why I take pleasure in my weaknesses, the insults, the hardships, the persecutions, the troubles that I suffer for Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong. When I am weak, then God can show his power. When I struggle, God can show up. When I am weak, I can feel this struggle, the same struggle that Christ felt. Jesus Christ was a human, and he experienced the same temptations, the same struggles that we experience. He was fully God and fully human. And so, man, this is getting long. I'm gonna wrap this up. But through the thorn in our flesh, so whatever that may be, turning to God, God will take your hand and guide you through it. He will get you through it, but you have to surrender to him. So that is my message for today, and that's what I really wanted to drive home. It's still, I struggle with it 120%. And some days I still struggle in many ways. We all struggle. But even with nutrition, Some days I do. Is it better than it used to be? Heck yes. Is it always smooth sailing? No. Do I struggle with my training sometimes and my body image? 100%. Do I struggle with some other things that I'm not telling you guys about? Yes. But through the struggle, we can then rely on God. If we were just perfect, we wouldn't have any need to rely on God. And he wants us to grab a hold of him. He wants us to take him in our lives and use his strength, not our own might. All right, I'm going to wrap this up. Man, I was preaching today. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this and maybe an area of weakness. What is a thorn in your flesh that you struggle with where God has come through and he has really, you've seen his power in your life? Maybe not even a thorn. Just how have you seen Jesus Christ's power in your life? I'd love to hear about it. If you have questions, leave them below. I will screenshot them and then maybe answer them on my story. And if you have prayer requests, leave them below. Love to hear that as well and pray over that this week. So God bless you guys. Pray about this passage. How is God speaking to you? What is really impacting you in your own life, in your journey? I don't think anything's by accident. So if you're watching this and you've watched this point, I don't believe anything's a coincidence. So pray about it. Leave your comments. And I will talk to you guys soon. Happy Friday.